In the heart of medieval Catalonia, where the air was thick with the scent of pine, and the earth was rich with the history of ancient kingdoms, a single sight could strike fear into the bravest of hearts, the gallows. These ominous structures, towering over the landscape, were more than just places of execution. They were the grim and undeniable symbols of power, jurisdiction, and authority. Each time a new set of gallows was erected, the message was clear. Someone held the right to life and death over this land. Catalonia, a region marked by a complex web of feudal loyalties and competing jurisdictions, saw the proliferation of gallows as a testament to the fragmented nature of power. In a land where every noble, king, and lord vied for control, the gallows became a visual reminder of who held the ultimate authority. The sight of a scaffold, whether it stood in the bustling market square of a town or on a lonely hilltop, was a stark reminder of the reach of the law and the severity of its enforcement. The gallows were more than just wooden structures. They were symbols of terror and jurisdiction. Those who held the full authority to govern, known as the monarchs, often displayed their power by building gallows. These gallows were not just for executions, but served as a constant and visible warning to the people. They were the ultimate symbol of the authority's power to punish, and by extension to protect. In contrast, those who only had limited authority, such as the mixtum imperi, which allowed them to punish minor offenses, used simpler structures like the pillory, where public shaming and physical punishment were meted out. The placement of gallows was strategic. They were often erected in prominent locations, such as high hills or along major roads, to maximize their visibility. One such example is the Puig de les Forks, or Hill of the Gallows, found in various parts of Catalonia. These high places not only served as execution sites, but also as landmarks, often used to demarcate the boundaries of different jurisdictions. The Tossal de les Forks in La Selva del Camp and the Tossal del Penjat in Lleida are just a few examples of how these gallows became part of the landscape and the local toponymy. In the town of Vic, for instance, the pillory in the marketplace served as a point of reference, a reminder of the local authorities' presence. But it was the gallows, often placed on the outskirts of towns, that truly marked the limits of jurisdiction. They were erected in places like La Senia and Les Salines, on the edges of the municipality of Tortosa, where they served as both a deterrent and a boundary marker. The gallows were so integral to the concept of jurisdiction that they were often the subject of legal disputes. In 1381, the monastery of Saint Pierre de Rhodes bought the village of Nancal along with its full jurisdiction from the Count of Imperies. When a new count challenged these rights in 1540, the gallows, which had stood for over a century, provided crucial evidence of the monastery's claim. The gallows were not just symbols, they were also historical markers, testifying to the continuity of power. Maintaining the gallows was a serious matter. In 1318, the local authorities in Tortosa paid a carpenter to repair the gallows, which had been damaged by wind and rot. The costs were not insignificant, but they were necessary to ensure that the symbol of authority remained intact. The gallows were often simple structures, consisting of vertical posts and a horizontal beam, but they required regular maintenance to prevent them from deteriorating. In some cases, the gallows were even reinforced with stone to add to their permanence and solemnity. The gallows also played a crucial role in the relationship between local authorities and the royal jurisdiction. In 1357, the government of Barcelona ordered the stone gallows in Montgat to be moved to ensure the safety of the coast guards who had to set beacon fires. This decision reflected the local government's desire to manage the royal jurisdiction for practical and strategic reasons. Similarly, in 1388, the city of Tarragona ordered the repair of the pillory and gallows, emphasizing their importance in maintaining the city's order and the authority of the royal jurisdiction. The gallows were not just symbols of terror. They were also a source of pride for the local authorities. In 1319, the municipal government of Barcelona requested and obtained permission from the king to mark the city's territory with stone gallows. This not only reinforced the city's jurisdiction, but also elevated its status. The gallows were often adorned with the city's coat of arms, alongside that of the king, symbolizing the shared authority and the city's preeminent position. In 1451, the councillors of Barcelona summarized the importance of the gallows in defining the city's limits. They noted that the stone gallows erected in Montgat at the Pass of Finestrelles and near the town of Molins de Rey served to mark the boundaries of the city's jurisdiction. This was a clear indication that the gallows were not just about punishment, but about defining and asserting the limits of authority. The gallows, with their stark and unyielding presence, were a constant reminder of the power that governed the land. They were the physical manifestations of the complex and often contentious relationships between different authorities in medieval Catalonia. Whether they stood in the center of a town or on a distant hill, the gallows told a story of power, jurisdiction, and the unyielding nature of authority. In the medieval world, the gallows were more than just a tool for capital punishment. They were powerful symbols that marked the boundaries of a lord's jurisdiction and authority. In Catalonia, a region with a patchwork of jurisdictions, the gallows played a crucial role in defining who had the right to rule and where. In the town of Solsona, for example, the gallows took the form of 3 stone pillars on the edge of the municipal boundary. These pillars were a visual reminder of the shared jurisdiction between the local canonry and the Viscount of Cardona. The pillars symbolized the limits of their authority, and a horizontal wooden beam completed the structure, ready to serve its original purpose if needed. The gallows often became the focus of jurisdictional disputes. In 1334, the city of Barcelona tried to prevent the municipality of Molins de Rei from becoming a separate jurisdiction. The conflict centered on the gallows, which the lords of Molins de Rei repeatedly built and the officials of Barcelona demolished. The vicar of Barcelona, acting on behalf of the king, was tasked with destroying these structures, which were seen as a challenge to the city's authority. Similar conflicts arose in other parts of Catalonia. In 1355, the Bishop of Vic ordered the king's vicar to destroy gallows built in Masdalmau, claiming the area was outside royal jurisdiction. The Count of Impures faced a similar issue in 1304, when he erected gallows on the boundary of the castle of Albans. The monarch promptly sent his vicar to demolish them, sparking a legal dispute that lasted for decades. The destruction and reconstruction of gallows became a symbol of these jurisdictional battles. In 1339, the vicar of Girona demolished the gallows built by the lord of Palau de Terry, and in the same year he had to do the same in Palau Sater. These acts were not just about physical structures, they were about asserting control and jurisdiction. The gallows also played a role in more formal transfers of power. When the Count of Foix ceded the jurisdiction of Montcada in the city of Vic to the king in 1450, he explicitly included the right to erect gallows as part of the transfer. The gallows were a visual sign of the king's authority, and only the king's officials could use them. In 1395, Joan Aguilo acquired several towns, including Mor, Aguilella, Montalba, Corbella, and Calacant. The ceremony to take possession involved the erection of gallows at the limits of each place, symbolizing the new lord's authority. The vicar, as the royal jurisdictional official, presided over the ceremony, declaring the new lord's rights and jurisdiction. The gallows were not just symbols, they also served as a means of intimidation. In 1349, the Procurator General of Catalonia responded to a serious attack on the Jewish neighborhood in Tàrrega by erecting specific gallows in the town. This was a clear message that the authorities were in control and would enforce the law. Similarly, in 1391, after widespread attacks on Jewish communities, the governor of Catalonia placed scaffolds in central squares in Barcelona to deter future violence. In 1366, after the execution of Bernat de Cabrera, the Count of Osona, King Peter the Ceremonious placed gibbets in the town square of Vic to assert his authority over the municipal government. The gallows were a visible reminder of the consequences of defiance. Even in the 16th century, the gallows remained a powerful symbol. In Baga, the ceremony of taking possession of a jurisdiction included the erection of gallows, though the ritual had become more complex and symbolic. The gallows, therefore, were not just tools of punishment, but were deeply intertwined with the concept of jurisdiction and authority. They marked the boundaries of power and served as a constant reminder of the lord's ability to enforce the law. Despite the complexity of the medieval landscape, the gallows continued to hold their symbolic and intimidating power, reflecting the intricate web of authority and control in medieval Catalonia. In the 15th century, the city of Barcelona found itself in a state of tension. The local government was divided between the oligarchy, which held traditional power, and reformist groups who sought change. Amid this conflict, the governor, Joan de Corbera, took a firm stance, using fear and force to maintain control. He erected gallows in prominent places throughout the city, not just as a means of punishment, but as a powerful symbol of his authority and the severe consequences of defiance. The gallows were more than just structures for execution. They were a constant reminder of the governor's power. In the Placa Nova and the Placa del Blat, the governor ordered the construction of gallows, complete with an axe used for cutting off heads and hands. These gallows were meant to instill fear and ensure compliance with the new restrictions on carrying weapons. The people of Barcelona, witnessing these imposing structures, became more cautious and less likely to challenge the governor's rule. However, the municipal governments were not passive in the face of this intimidation. They too understood the power of the gallows and sought to use them to their advantage. In 1349, the highest authority in Catalonia, Jasper de Guimerà, had special scaffolds built in Cervera after riots against the Jews. This was seen as a swift and decisive action to restore order. However, the local authorities in Cervera viewed this as an infringement on their own jurisdiction. Once the governor left, they ordered the royal bailiff to demolish the new gallows and transfer the executed individuals to the traditional ones, maintaining their own authority and control. In other parts of Catalonia, the use of gallows for intimidation was also prevalent. In Tortosa, during a severe grain shortage in 1374, the municipal government decided to build gallows to prevent popular revolts. They believed that the threat of punishment would keep the people from rising up against the council for their inability to provide food. The gallows were not just a tool of the local authorities. They were also used by higher powers to assert their dominance. In Elche, a town in the Kingdom of Valencia, the municipal government, with the approval of the procurator of Barcelona, ordered the construction of sturdy gallows along the main roads. This was done to punish and deter criminals, and to serve as a warning to others. The local authorities were willing to bear the cost of these structures, recognizing the importance of maintaining order and the fear that the gallows inspired. The presence of gallows in the landscape was a clear message to the population. They were a visual reminder that those who defied the established order would face severe consequences. The gallows symbolized the power of those who could order and carry out executions. In 1456, during a revolt in Sciacca, Sicily, the first act of the rebels was to knock down the royal gallows, symbolically challenging the monarch's authority. The use of gallows was not just about punishment. It was about maintaining social order and the power structure. The gallows served as a constant reminder of who held the ultimate authority and the severe consequences of defying that authority. This was a message that the people understood well, and it shaped their behavior and their interactions with the governing bodies. In the 14th century, King Peter the Ceremonious of Aragon sought to strengthen his royal authority in Catalonia. He proclaimed himself sovereign lord after God in Catalonia, emphasizing his supreme position. This claim to power was not just a declaration. It was rooted in the legal and philosophical ideas of the time. Peter and his advisors found support in Roman law, which allowed the king to define his role as above the law, yet still bound by it, as he stated in 1380. Si et in quantum volumus, meaning, if and to the extent we wish. This approach gave the king a degree of independence from existing laws, aligning with the broader European trend where supreme power, initially reserved for emperors, was extended to princes and kings. Pope Clement V recognized this shift in 1313, though with some reservations. Philosophical and theological arguments, drawing on Aristotelian reasoning, supported the idea that a single ruler was more fitting for the natural order of the universe. This philosophical foundation helped justify the king's supreme authority. The constitutions of Catalonia, the highest legal norm in the country, were formally issued by the king. However, these laws were the result of negotiations with the estates, representatives of the nobility, clergy, and towns in the general parliament or courts. The estates pressed the king to consider their interests, and over time, they began to assert their role as representatives of the country. This created significant limits to the king's claims of supreme power, especially since he lacked financial resources and needed the support of the estate. The estate's role was not just about protecting their own interests. It was also about ensuring that the king's power was used for the common good. Legal, philosophical, and theological formulations emphasized that the king's power was not a form of dominion, but a duty to uphold justice and equity. This idea was rooted in the belief that the king's authority came from a specific and agreed upon session by the people, a concept promoted by urban elites. This balance between the king's authority and the estate's representativeness was crucial for the development of the Nació Catalana, the Catalan nation. The estates aimed to represent the interests of the entire country, creating a duality in their relationship with the king. This duality ensured that the king's power was checked and balanced, reflecting a more democratic and representative governance structure. The king's role in maintaining order and justice was evident in various aspects of governance, such as the administration of the death penalty. The king had the authority to impose and enforce the death penalty, a symbol of his supreme power. However, this power was often exercised in conjunction with the estates, who had a say in the legal and judicial processes. The presence of gallows and other symbols of royal authority in public places served as a reminder of the king's power and the need for order and justice. In practice, the king's authority was exercised through his representatives, such as governors and bailiffs, who were tasked with maintaining order and enforcing the law. The king's power was not absolute. It was checked by the estates and the legal and philosophical principles that emphasized the king's duty to the people. This balance between the king's authority and the estate's representativeness was a key feature of medieval Catalan governance. The monarchs of the 14th and 15th centuries wielded their power with a blend of justice and intimidation, often using the threat of severe penalties, including the death penalty, to maintain order and reinforce their authority. This approach was rooted in the belief that the king, as the supreme guarantor of justice, had the divine right to dictate the highest forms of punishment. The royal jurisdiction, which extended over various aspects of life, from urban peace to the loyalty of subjects, was a cornerstone of the monarch's power. However, this power came with financial and political challenges. The king often resorted to issuing remissions, licenses, and dispensations in exchange for financial donations, a practice that, while providing necessary resources, also tarnished the ideal of a just ruler. These remissions, which absolved individuals from certain crimes, particularly those that had disturbed the peace, were a double-edged sword. They helped the king raise funds, but also fueled suspicions among the municipalities that the monarch was more interested in financial gain than in justice. The monarchs, especially Peter the Ceremonious and his son John I, frequently used the death penalty to assert their authority and deal with threats to royal jurisdiction. This was evident in the severe penalties imposed for crimes against the state, such as sedition, and in the harsh measures taken to maintain order, such as the prohibition on officials commuting sentences of death or mutilation without royal permission. The death penalty was not only a tool for punishment, but also a means of intimidation, as seen in the orders given to officials to carry out royal commands under the threat of losing their lives. These practices were not arbitrary, but were intended to underscore the monarch's supreme authority and the gravity of the offenses. For example, the king's orders to his officials often included threats of death if they failed to comply, emphasizing the seriousness of their duties. In times of social tension, such as the attacks on Jewish neighborhoods during the Black Death, the monarchs used public displays of punishment, like the erection of gallows, to restore order and deter further violence. The use of the death penalty was also a strategic tool in the monarch's interactions with other powerful entities, such as the church. When conflicts arose, the king would use the threat of the death penalty to ensure that his authority was respected and that his subjects remained loyal. This was seen in the clashes with the Archbishop of Tarragona and the orders to officials to enforce royal policies under the threat of severe penalties. In the end, the monarchs of this period navigated a complex landscape of power, justice, and finance. Their use of severe penalties and the threat of the death penalty was a means to reinforce their authority, maintain order, and address the challenges they faced. While these methods sometimes blurred the lines between justice and intimidation, they were essential in asserting the monarch's role as the supreme guarantor of justice and the protector of the realm.